There was blood and the snow. The excavation team poured hot water into the frozen tomb again and again, and what came back out ran red. Meltwater, blood, the thawed trace of buried horses waiting beside the dead for more than 2,000 years. It moved through the snow in thin, dark streams, ancient flesh returning to the world as liquid. The archaeologist's dog wandered near, drank from it, and remained only a dog. Nothing happened, and yet everything had changed, because by then the tomb was open, the ice was giving way, and something that had slept for centuries was already on its way back. In the summer of 1993, on the Yukok Plateau in the Altai Mountains, archaeologists began opening a burial mound frozen deep in the Siberian earth. What they found was not simply a grave, but a chamber held in suspension for more than 2,000 years. Water had seeped into the tomb long ago, then turned to ice, sealing everything inside. So before they could reach her, they had to melt their way in, slowly, with heated water, as if unmaking a spell. And then she appeared, the Ice Maiden, a young woman, preserved by the permafrost, buried with ceremony, surrounded by offerings, 6 horses laid to accompany her into the next world, and on her skin, tattoos, still visible after centuries, animals, antlers, curved bodies, hybrid creatures, signs from a symbolic language that had survived where almost nothing else had. But what moves me most is not only the fact that she was found, it is the feeling that she was waiting. When I first read about her, something happened instantly. It did not feel like a casual fascination or historical curiosity or even admiration. It felt more like recognition. As if this woman, preserved beneath ice and earth for so long, had crossed an impossible distance and arrived directly in the room with me. I remember reading about her and feeling that I had to begin at once. There was no real gap between encounter and action. I told Mark about it. Ideas about an artwork appeared. The Ice Maiden talked to me in my dreams. It was clear that the artwork should be like a portal, the field she would enter through. And then I began working on her face, needle felting this large portrait head, trying not to explain her, but to follow her, to let the image come forward with its own force. And that became talking to ghosts. And ever since, that work has carried something unusual around it. Whenever we show it, people tell us things. Not ordinary things, not polished opening night conversation. They come to us with stories about ghosts, about visitations, about voices, about strange forms of connection they have never spoken aloud. I remember one opening in particular, a woman who seemed completely composed and elegant, professional, the kind of person who gives nothing away easily. She took us aside and told us that since childhood she had been able to speak to ghosts, to the dead, and that she had never told anyone before. And somehow, around this work, this keeps happening, again and again, as if the piece does not just depict a threshold, but opens one.
And that's why today's guest feels like such a profound meeting point to us. Because at some point, while talking to ghosts had already begun making its way to the world, we discovered that the Canadian poet Kim Trainor has also been calling into the orbit of that same figure. She had written a book, Ledi. And what was so striking to us was that Kim did not approach the Ice Maiden as a historical curiosity or as some distant archaeological subject. She approached her as a living site of inquiry, where grief, memory, excavation, and the body meet. In Kim's work, the unearthing of this ancient woman becomes entangled with personal loss, the mourning, with the question of what remains and what continues to speak even after burial. That felt immediately familiar to us, because this was also the territory in which we as Maison Douce often work, the place where images become invocation, where artwork become a vessel, where something from the past presses into the present and demands form. Kim Trainor is a Canadian poet whose work runs through ecology, grief, memory, and witness with extraordinary sensitivity and intelligence. Her books include Karyotype, Ledi, A Fire Runs Through Me, and most recently, A Blueprint for Survival. For us, Ledi was the signal. It was the point of contact, a poet standing at another threshold, listening to the same woman. So today, here we are, with the Ice Maiden in the frozen earth, with the artwork she awakened, and with the poetry that carried her voice into another life. This is the Transmute Tapes, and today we're very happy to welcome Kim Trainor.
The Transmute Tapes, a Maison Douce podcast. The Transmute Tapes, Maison Douce.
Kim, welcome to the Transmute Tapes podcast. So good to have you on.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. You're in Canada, we're in Hamburg, Germany, so it's evening here. You're bright and early. You're 10 a.m. So we get all the best from our guests. That's amazing.
It is a beautiful, beautiful, sunny, brisk morning. So
that's lovely. That's lovely. Yeah. We mentioned in our brief introduction how we got to meet, or how we met over our Siberian Ice Maiden. And we talked a little bit about her excavation and how she was found and what role she plays both in your poetry and our artworks. But we really want to explore this topic among others. So maybe we start at the very beginning. So how did you find the Ice Maiden, or how did the Ice Maiden find you?
Right. It feels that way, doesn't it? That she reaches out to you from the past. Yeah. Well, I first came across her, I think it was the mid-90s. Like, I think she was discovered by Natalia Poloznak in 93, something like that. And BBC Horizons, I think, did a documentary about her. So I first actually came across her from seeing this somewhat eerie documentary that described how they excavated her body. And I mean, I always, when I talk about it, and even thinking about my book, I feel very conflicted about it, because I feel there was a kind of violence done to her by disinterring her body, disturbing her rest. And the one thing I really remembered at the time from the documentary was the archaeologists saying some of them started having terrible dreams, like they dreamt they were having their eyes gouged out, or that things were like hands were coming out of the earth to grab them. That sense that this is a powerful place, a powerful person, and you're disturbing her. And that kind of stuck with me. And also just the care that was put into laying her to rest by her people.
Yes.
It seems so delicate and careful and so ritualistic. in a way that we now, when we lose someone, I don't think we have those rituals in place so much, at least in the Western world. It's almost we hide death away. But I wasn't at the time writing poetry, and I just thought it was a very interesting, haunting story, and a person that I felt a connection with, for sure. She was a shaman, possibly a storyteller, clearly had an important role in her society, that they took such care in burying her. But anyways, I went on with my life, and then I had a relationship, my first serious relationship with someone, and we maintained a good friendship after we parted ways, but he was always in a very depressed state, and at one point he took his own life after quite a long time after. And I guess I was thinking a lot about that and thinking how to process that, but I didn't put the two people together until I really started to decide I want to write about Ledi. I want to tell her story. And at first I was really flailing. I didn't know I didn't feel qualified to talk about her, or that it wasn't her story, was not my story to tell. How can she speak on her own behalf? But then I somehow it clicked, and I thought, oh, this is about Stefan and my partner at the time, who had killed himself. And I realized it's as if there were almost three bodies, actually. So there was Ledi's body, there was his body in memory, and then mine as well, because you start to feel, when you lose someone, you go through your own death, in a sense. And I've had people say that they almost have felt there are several different bodies in the story that are being ritually described and remembered. Yeah. So that's how I came to know Ledi. And then, of course, because I was trying to write about her, I just read a lot. So I was looking up articles by Natalia Polaznak. I found an really old volume about the Pazyryk culture, the Scythians, in Herodotus. And then so it was a long process. It was years and years and years, like maybe 15 years between when I first heard of her and then when I started writing. But when I did actually sit down and start to write, I wrote the book very quickly, like a couple of weeks. Except for one section, the section called Ghost, which took longer to come. And I think is the sort of, in some ways, the heart of it. And that I wrote later when I was at a writer's residency.
Yeah, we read
that's
that in researching. Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a really, really interesting book. We just this morning, to prep for our interview, we flipped through it again and went over the Ghost chapter again, which is really... it has such a gravity. It's so, first of all, I think it's very, very brave to write that openly about such a tough topic. And if it's okay for you to dive into that a little bit, I'm really interested. Was it like a conscious creative choice to combine your personal loss with this symbolic loss of this female archetype, or did that happen in writing? Like, when did you combine these stories?
As I recall, I was going to a library at the university where I was working, where we used to spend time, actually, because we met at the university. And I think his presence was all around, actually. Like in the library, we met at the radio station, as I describe it. And at first I was just writing about her, but it wasn't working very well. And then I just started describing him. And I think it just clicked. It was in the process of writing. And I realized, oh, yeah, I'm writing about him. And so there was like a palimpsest. It was like an overlay of both of them. So reaching through him to her, I suppose, almost like a receiver, like a transmission. So that's sort of how it began. So I would say it was not immediately a conscious decision. It happened somewhat spontaneously.
Yeah.
It is so fascinating because it is so, in a way, so similar of what we experienced with her, because in the time when, you know, we were making the flag, we were doing the felted portrait of her.
Yeah.
She was appearing, you know, we found the article and she kept on, you know, popping up somehow, and I had dreams about her.
Yeah.
And then I really had the strong feeling that she wanted to be present in this present day. She wanted to, I don't know, somehow re-emerge and just be there and be seen and somehow tell her story. And then was working on the portrait, and then I was having a little trip to London because there is a specialized college. It's called the Arthur Findlay College, which is a weird Hogwarts-like place. It is an old manor, castle-like, where they teach spiritualistic techniques of trance and mediumship. And I was there because I was so interested in in using these techniques as an artist, and because I felt, you know, we had her there as a portrait, and I really felt, okay, I think she wants to talk. Someone wants to tell a story, and I wanted to, you know, dive into that. And while I was there, we had a meeting, and one of the tutors there, she said, okay, someone's here. He wants to give a message, and it was my ex-boyfriend who also took his life. And that was such, I mean, when I read your story, it was such a weird coincidence. Which I can't explain, and which, I love that like being in the world, these things.
Yeah. But to add on to this, you know, it's really extraordinary. In the process of, I mean, Lotte is specialized in felting those portrait heads. So I'm involved in other parts of these artworks, and you always feel like, because we live in our studio, and so you live with the artworks, and it starts as an abstract piece of felted sculpture. And there's always this one day where she kind of captures the personality, so to speak. And if I sit in the next room with the door open, and you start turning your head because you have the feeling like someone is watching you. Like with every felted portrait, it's that way, but with her, it was really, really intense. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at the flag, the portrait online. I'm not sure how large it is, but it's a very powerful face that you've created or channeled.
Thanks. It's rather big. It's bigger than life size.
Yeah, it's the head alone is like, only the face is like this, and then a headpiece on. Yeah.
But you know what? Talking of that, I mean, the impact it had on you, on us, is the one thing. I'm really interested how people resonated when you told the story in such a, you know, it says it's a poetry book in a way, but it's, at least for me, very personally, it has the impact of very different genres as well. It's not, if people, I can only recommend reading Ledi to anyone listening, but it's not like cozy poetry or something at points. It hits really hard, like a very unique form of storytelling, I would say. So what kind of resonance did you get from your readers?
So like when I went to the Banff artist residency, which is where I wrote Ghost, and I met with the poet Lisa Robertson, and she mentioned that she felt it had a connection to the poetry of Mallarmé, and a particular form, the tombeau. Like he wrote a long poem to I think it was the death of his son, so that the text that he wrote was almost as if creating a mausoleum or a house for the body of his son. So the text becomes the body. So there's like this translation of the body into words. And I thought that is kind of what I'm doing. And then I have actually had people reach out to me and say how deeply they connected with it because they had also perhaps lost someone. And I feel as if And the writing of it was very much like a ceremonial almost. Like, you say when the working with Ledi with her face, and suddenly there's a moment when she comes to life. There's like that transition. I think when I wrote Ghost, that's when the transition happened and the text truly came to life. And I felt there was this meeting between Stefan and Ledi, myself. And for me also a kind of coming back to life, because there had been that sense you die yourself when you lose someone that you had a deep connection to. But people have said to me, they've felt deeply touched by it. And I almost feel it does perform that element of ritual. It's like a liturgy in a way. So, and I was very consciously attempting in places to create that sense of chant or liturgy, like the naming of the flowers, for example, that were growing over her grave. And in fact, while, you can sit down and read it solo, I was very lucky I made some films, like a little poetry film out of each section of the book. And I've had the opportunity to perform it in a digital art gallery with my soundscape artist.
Fantastic.
And that was really powerful, actually. We did several performances of it, and it felt like it was coming alive in a way that it doesn't when it's just on the page, which is the one thing I'm always pushing against with poetry is how can I move beyond this genre?
Yeah.
Because poetry, traditionally lives through time. It's musical. It's not just static. And it's been, especially with modernist poetry, has been stuck on the page and become very much an image. But and I think that's like thinking of your flag. It's art has that static aspect to it, but often it's calling back through time and calling us into that space and coming out from it. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, talking about coming off the page, I wanna tap into video and other media work later on. I really want to investigate the initial moment a bit more, if that's fine with you.
Absolutely.
Because it's interesting for us. Or showing the flag in an exhibition always triggers certain responses. I don't know, you remember the one, you have to tell about it. Because when we have art exhibitions and we often do performances when we have an art show, but independent of that, the flag always triggers a certain response, I would say.
Yeah, and that's, one thing you were just saying and you were just saying is this feeling of art shouldn't, or poetry shouldn't just be in a book. It should be read out loud. It should be a shared moment. And that's what we feel with art too. It's not just you have a picture and you hang it in a gallery and take a look and then move on. You should, have this collective experience somehow. That's also why we're doing flags, to have them somehow in a performance, to be carried around and to be perceived in another way. And coming back to the Ice Maiden portrait, whenever we have her in a show or in an exhibition, weird things start to happen. And one of my favorite things was, it was in our old studio, and we had an opening and a very elegant business lady. She was attending the show and was really interested. And then she took us aside and said, she's seen that work of art, and because she feels we would understand, she has to tell us something that she hasn't told anyone else, which is that she sometimes can see the dead, when they have a strong message for somebody. And she absolutely didn't want to share that with anybody because she was like a corporate woman. Yep. It would have destroyed her reputation. But she felt like, okay, we're the those kind of artists that you can share that. And Ledi, or the Ice Maiden, has I think she's some kind of portal, or she's some kind of speaking to the unconscious parts of people, or she has some kind of power that radiates with her story. And
no, absolutely, that idea of a portal, I think, and so art in general, you could say, or a really good poem is a kind of portal, or bringing back to life. Every time you read a poem, you breathe into it again, even if the poet is long past. But with the Ice Maiden in particular, just the way that she was buried, and the sort of spices, and like the coriander, and the cloth, the fabrics that were carefully placed with her, and how carefully she was preserved as well. I mean, I think she was buried with her horses too. Just the kurgan, like the burial mound in itself, as a portal into this past, so deeply past that we have no real sense of what it might be like, and yet you feel viscerally as if you have a glimpse through her. And that I found very powerful. And it's that materiality, I think, that it's spiritual but material at the same time, which makes it particularly powerful. And that's why I do come back, though, to that violence done to her, in the sense that the moment, like as I describe in the book, the moment she came into the touch of sunlight, she began to decay, like she had been so carefully preserved in her time. And so just by us wanting to be able to reach to her through that portal, it's harmful as well. So I was struggling with that, and feeling like with my book, am I doing a similar kind of harm? But also feeling there's that power to her.
Yes. And the necessity to tell her story. That's pushing. Yeah. Well, I wanna dive into that a bit, because you mentioned it briefly, but reading your book, checking the archaeologists' diaries and journals. I'm not an archaeologist. I don't know if that's common practice, but it seems so brutal to unfrost her, to pour hot water over it. And you have this scene in your book that really stuck with us. We mentioned it briefly in the introduction as well. The one point where they just pour hot water onto the horse's meat and it melts down, and the dogs that stray around lick it. So they stay healthy, but still it's such a violation. So maybe you can speak a bit about the responsibility and the ethics of unearthing the past as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I mean, I tried in the book to describe it in a somewhat dispassionate or detached way, but I think I was trying to express concern about what almost a kind of horror. Like they were, as you say, they were taking. I mean, I think at one point they had a blowtorch that they were using to melt the ice, because the way that she was buried, the water is trickling down every season and then freezing, and so it's froze, and it's remained frozen for thousands of years, and then the hubris of an archaeologist to come and say, "I'm going to find her." I mean, Natalia Polaznak I think her husband was an archaeologist as well, and he had initially found some of the Altai warriors as well in kurgans, and she was determined to find one herself. And there was this beautiful symmetry that she found a very powerful woman, and she was a woman, but there was that violence done. So the practice itself, I think now there would be a lot more resistance, and certainly amongst the Altai population, like the current indigenous population, there was a real outrage.
Yeah.
By when they learned of the practice that had been done, the fact that the Ice Maiden had been removed, and not only that, but she was then displayed in a museum. They were clearly, this is for them, they feel, regardless of whatever scientific tests have been done, and there's always an attempt to say, well, there's probably no connection, but they felt a spiritual connection to her as their ancestor who lived in the same place, practiced similar things in their culture. They felt that she needed to be repatriated, to be returned, and not only just returned to them, but returned to the earth, that she should be reinterred and her sovereignty, I suppose, respected. So from my perspective as a poet writing, I felt, the first section of the book is called Wrenched from the Cold Earth. And it did feel as if the act of writing was also, because it's like a stripping of her, right? Like I'm doing that with words, even if there's an ironic or emotional distance from that, I am describing what the archaeologist did. And you can condemn it, but by describing it, you're still describing it. And presenting her in that vulnerability. So I did come to feel very conflicted about it, but also such a strong sense of protection for her. Like I wanted to protect her, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I suppose I just felt that artists they work with vulnerable moments and things. I worked with, at Banff, I worked with Karen Soley, another Canadian poet, and she was the one who encouraged me to go through several drafts of Ghost, because she felt the initial book didn't have that section. And she said it felt like it was missing something, and she was right. And I think because that was the heart of it, and it was the most vulnerable part of it. So perhaps to some extent, mitigating the vulnerability I asked of Ledi by taking it onto myself as well. So I also exposed myself essentially, right? Like I am saying, this is my vulnerability. And I remember Karen saying, well, this is very brave of you. This is very, I couldn't write so deeply about myself. But I guess there was that balance. Like if I expect to expose the Ice Maiden's life in this way, in such intimate detail, then I have to be willing to do that myself as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of an energetic balance, or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it, Lotte, with making the flag?
Yeah, I was, the moment Mark described when, the thing that is the starting point is just material. It's just wool, and you're working on it, and then one point, I somehow feel it's like it's being kind of downloaded. There's a presence there. Normally, it's when I'm doing the eyes, and then I, felt this weird moment of, oh, may I hold you like this? May I even touch you? Is that okay?
Right.
Which is kind of weird. Do you have this kind of inner conversation with your own artwork? But I really felt I had to, ask that. And then I kind of, we did the flag with the inner, I think, feeling of honoring her and giving her a honorable and a place that she, that is worthy of her, and that so it felt like the right thing to do. And also the little, doing the little golden details which are inspired by her tattooings, and it felt like finding traces of her story, of her time, of her people, and which we can't really understand. We were talking a lot about, okay, what are these? Why are they so twisted? Why do they have these twisted legs? Those animals, and what do they mean? Have they been some kind of totems or clan signature, or were they a hunting tribe? What was their meaning? But it just felt the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I love with what you've done is there was so much. A lot of the books I looked at really are they learn a lot by looking at the textiles. How were these materials made? The felting tradition. Like I think they would often create the felt by placing the wool under their saddles when they were riding, and that would create a lot of friction and pressure on the wool. And then the little, the gold detail you mentioned, like she had, like I remember that from the cups of hot water that they were using, but I imagined little gold icons or symbols, pieces coming off of her headdress and floating in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly with her tattoos.
Yeah.
And just the fact that then they began to decay almost immediately. So to create a flag that re-embodies those elements, those material elements of their culture, I think is a beautiful thing to do.
I mean, you examined those as well. I mean, the whole physiological state of her, and also the ornaments of her tattoo, the materiality of her skin and everything. How was that process for you? I know from one of your press photos you have tattoos yourself, or at least one that's visible. Is there a comparison for you? Was that kind of I mean, you start to compare, right? You read up on someone so many thousands of years ago, having the same tradition, getting a tattoo as a rite of passage, as a totem, as whatever. So maybe you can share some thoughts you had on that, because you really examined her in detail as well.
Yeah, I did sort of a deep dive into tattoos because of her.
Yeah.
Learning a lot about the tradition of tattooing and what the process would have been at the time. It was very much a ritual, I think, that was meant to maybe speak to their spiritual gods or ancestors, maybe a form of memorialization, of telling stories, or of indicating position in your tribe. But I don't think that's changed in many ways. Like I think, okay, you get people who go on holiday and get drunk and get a tattoo when they don't remember it. But I think most people go to get a tattoo. It's meant to remember something or someone. And it's something about the pain of the experience, but also the permanence of it. That means you're making a very profound commitment to that memory or to that person. It's funny, when I was writing it, I think that began my love with the idea of the tattoo, because I didn't have any at the time, and in fact, I got my first tattoo when I finished writing Ghost. I finished writing it, and I thought, yeah, no, that's it. Like that's what was missing. Like lots of you talk about when it comes alive, and that's for me when the book came alive, really, like the eyes of the book. And I walked down. You know how it is, you feel sort of cut loose in a sense when you realize something may have been to some extent completed. Although I think that artwork is always, or poem is always, I mean, you get it published, it's in the book, but it still has another life. It's still moving. But I walked down into the town and I came across a tattoo parlor, and I just walked in. I got my first tattoo, almost as a way to
well done.
remember it. And the tattoo I got was I was reading a lot of Anne Carson at the time, the poet, and I got a Greek word tattooed, glucopikron, which means sweet bitter, but the Greek word for bittersweet. Because she had been writing about it in reference to a poem by Sappho. And it seemed like the word encapsulated for me the experience of writing the book and my experiences of losing this person.
Yes.
And of finishing the book, in a sense, and still having had that journey with the Ice Maiden. So it was a really important ritual, I suppose, for me to finish the book.
Yeah. So cool. It's such a poet tattoo too. I really like it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So, I mean, you just talked about ending this project. I'm really interested in how the whole idea of writing or being a poet started, maybe. So when did you, I mean, we often talk to artists from all walks of life and creative expressions. How did this journey start for you? When did you know that whatever is inside you may have to come out on pages?
Right. Well, I think I imprinted on books from when I was tiny, grasshopper size, and I always knew I was going to write. I wanted to write books. I just didn't know what that would be. I never felt a strong draw to writing fiction or stories. It always seemed a little strange to me to write about made-up people. But I did actually start by doing a lot of journaling, sort of writing about myself or the world. I did write some short stories, which ended up being published. And I was working on a novel, in fact, very terrible novel. And I was not enjoying it. I was really not enjoying it. Although normally I love writing. I love the process, like just putting ink on paper. And maybe that goes back to tattoos as well. But making marks, which there's that real materiality of writing a poem that I love. Once the poem goes from being like in a manuscript or a notebook to like you type it up on the computer, because I always write by hand in a notebook with ink. And then once you type it up, it dies a little bit. And then it gets printed in a book, and then it's even more entombed. So, partly that comes back to that idea of the disinterment of Ledi. It's a very painful, difficult process, but it's like coming back to life as well. But I was writing this terrible novel, and I had little kids at the time. So I didn't have a lot of time, and I was just, it'd be like I'd have to get up at 5 a.m. or very late at night to work. And I went to bed that night. I had been reading some poetry by Ted Hughes, the last book of poems that he wrote for Sylvia Plath, that he had been writing his whole life after her death. And there's a really powerful one. He's a very powerful poet. Despite the marital discord between him and Plath, they were a very powerful couple when they were working together, writing poetry. And his metaphors are just amazing. And he has this one, and every poem is thinking about her and thinking about the power of her work and of the difficulties of their relationship. But there's one where he's writing about, they had bought this little farmhouse in the English countryside. And they were there just for a season, and then she died. He left her for another woman. But the daffodils that were growing up in the meadow next to their farmhouse, and they would go out there and use scissors and harvest them to try to sell to market. And they were just amazed by the abundance of this place that they suddenly found themselves in, because they had determined they would work only through their art. Like they would earn their living by writing poetry, which is amazing. It's almost impossible to do today. And he's writing this poem about how the scissors get lost. They lose the scissors. And he describes the scissors as being like this anchor that's sinking deeper and deeper and deeper into the earth and getting rusty over time, and just sunk there like this dagger or this anchor in deep in the earth. And then the flowers that resurrect every year to remind him of her, but she only saw them that one season before she took her own life. And I remember thinking, I could write something. I could do this. Maybe this is what I couldn't sleep. I had like a nuit blanche. I was up all night thinking and tossing and turning, and I had just had images going through my head. And it really was just a calling. I woke up and I opened a notebook and I started writing a poem, and I never looked back. So I had never thought of myself as a poet, and I always thought you have to be called to be one. So I guess it just took a while before I was called to be one. And then that's what I worked on. And now actually just saying to you now, I realize, that book of his was very much a kind of memorializing as well. And clearly that's what I was doing with Ledi too.
Yeah. Before you talk about poetry a lot with not only because you write about life and death, but also I get the sense the way you talk about it, it is about life and death with you. And you mentioned before losing someone feels a bit like dying yourself. And then, so is writing, what place does writing hold in that process for you? Is that some form of finishing something, restarting something? What place does this hold?
I feel like it's I mean, the process of writing is a way of remembering, recollecting, but also a kind of ending. It can be like if you're writing about something that is past, which it was with this book. Honestly, I feel when we're alive, we're so busy. We get habituated to things. Everything is familiar. We don't notice it. We just race through lives. Like right now, I'm in the middle of marking 130 student poetry papers. And you don't pay attention. You don't pay attention, right? You're just like, I just have to do this, and then I have to do this, and then I have to go get groceries, and we just get ground down. And what writing does is it creates this beautiful spaciousness, kind of dilates time. Like speaking of a portal, the notebook always for me has been like a portal. So I can sit down, I have my notebook, I have my pen. I can take it anywhere. It's very portable at any time. So I don't have a practice really. Like I don't make myself get up at a certain time and work for a certain number of hours. It's much more spontaneous than that. And, I'll go a long time where I don't work at all. I don't write. And it's sort of been like that for me for some time now. So I'm just starting to have some ideas for new work. But when I am sitting there, and I felt that the very first time when I woke up that morning after reading Ted Hughes and having this revelation, it was like time dilated. It opened for me. It just slowed and paused. And there was just like the universe breathing, and I was just completely alive and immersed in the writing of the poem. And I could be working on it for a couple hours. I wouldn't even know. Yeah. And that's what the poetry has been for me, is like almost a meditative practice, I suppose.
That's fascinating because you assumed my follow-up question, which is always, we're very interested in the behind the scenes, the processes. So I sense that it's important to have an analog process, a mobile process. You have a notebook, maybe fountain pen or something, you write by hand. So, but it's like a form of meditation. You say you can switch it on, dive into it right away, possibly whenever you find the time.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because I did notice that when I was at Banff, we were a group of 12 poets, some who had never had a book published, some who had several published. But it just gives you a chance, like 5 weeks where you can just work. And a couple of them said to me, like, they'd seem to need a very elaborate process to actually get to the point where they could start writing. Like there'd have to be an hour of yoga, and then, a half an hour of this and another hour of this, and then some writing practice. And I think because I learned to write my poetry when my kids were really little, your time is fractured. Yeah. So you just take that moment when you can. Yeah. I'm sure
I feel
you
that
know
so much. Yeah. It's a real mom superpower or parents superpower. I think it's you get stripped of all this. Oh, I need that. I want to have, for this cup of tea and half an hour of this. Yeah. No, you just, you have those 2 hours and you got to use them no matter what.
Exactly.
Yes. And use them wisely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I guess I learned that just on the fly from, like, I remember writing parts of even this book, like sitting next to my youngest boy, while he was trying to fall asleep, just like with a flashlight on my shoulder, like writing in a notebook. So you really do take the time that you can. So yes, it is an analog process. Absolutely. There's something, and I love zines and things that are done by hand or at least photocopied and stitched. Samizdat, anything like that, where it's really about how to, like, that deep urge to communicate in a very human way, where we still have marks on paper. Just as the idea of the analog camera, where you're actually taking light that's bouncing off of something and it's imprinting the photographic paper, the negative, and then onto the photographic paper, or like a Polaroid. I think I talk about Polaroids in the book a little bit, because there's that sense, like the Polaroids I took of Stefan when we were in the desert in the Mojave, those photographs truly hold a part of him, right? The image that was formed from his body interacting with the sunlight, and then with the photographic paper of the Polaroid. And there's something I find very, like, again, deeply powerful about that. Like a touchstone or totemic, as opposed to we're so deeply now digital, and now with AI, it just feels as if everything is an algorithm. And so to be able to go back to or insist upon that practice of writing in a notebook, or as you do, working with textiles, working with your hands. I think maybe I've always been a bit envious of artists, because they have the material practice of you're working with your body and working with materials. And maybe for me, the notebook is the closest I can get to it. Although I've worked with an artist friend who teaches at Kwantlen University here on the West Coast, and she works with fabric a lot. And she had one of my poems printed onto a long silk banner for an exhibit, and that was a really cool experience.
Lovely. It's interesting, because I want to come back to what you mentioned about the short films, the artsy short films you did for the poems. In the context of what you just said, is really interesting, because you like the analog, the raw feeling, the pen on paper, and then you move sometimes away into other mediums. And maybe, I mean, you told us briefly about how that came to be and how that felt and how you performed it live, but this seems to be something that you really enjoy and that kind of drives you, or you want to repeat that, or maybe we can explore this, because I see there's a similarity in crossing mediums. Also in our work, we have things on paper, on canvas. It's an artwork. It should and can talk for itself, but at the same time, we want to offer other ways to approach it, do performances, write texts and music for it, and give people another framework for interacting with the idea behind the artwork. And it seems to be something that you're interested in as well. For example, with I'm going to put those in the show notes for everyone watching or listening. If you want to check out these great short films, find them in the show notes. But I want you to talk a little bit about this, because I don't think it comes as a natural as a poet to dive into other forms of media like that.
Yeah, I think it is connected to that desire. Partly it's a desire for community. I think as a poet, you're very much, and an artist too, depending on the kind of art you do, but you're working alone in the studio, or you're working alone in a room. Although I often I like to write like in a cafe or somewhere where there's lots of people around, or on a SkyTrain or a bus. But I wanted to see if I could reach more people. And I'm not a big fan of, although I helped to run a poetry reading series for some years, I'm not a big fan of the poetry reading series. I feel that they can be wonderful, but they can be really horrible as well. And I wanted to see if there was a way, especially today, in North America, poetry has very little cachet. People aren't super interested in it. It's very niche. There's a tiny, very dedicated band of people who love it. And then mostly there's people reading novels, or they'd rather, go see a film or video. And I think a friend of mine said to me, well, maybe you should think about performing Ledi. And it was Ledi he was talking about, because he he thought it had a performative element to it. It has, certainly compared to most sort of collections of lyric poetry, there's a strong storyline, a narrative arc through it, although it's also very visually oriented in terms of just the artifacts from the grave and the flowers. But then they can also be chanted or spoken, so there's that musical aspect through time. And a film just seemed like a really great idea, like that I could do them. So I started with just one little one, and I realized I really enjoyed working on it. And I happened to have a colleague at the college where I teach, and she is a fiddle player, actually. She trained in Ireland. She did her PhD on session music in Irish pubs.
Nice.
So she spent her whole PhD hanging out in pubs listening to fiddle music.
I love that.
Which is wonderful. What a great subject. So she's a wonderful player and a composer, really interested in all kinds of instruments and sound effects. And like she'll take an image and she'll run it through a machine, through a program that will read the image and translate it into sound. So she'll do some really cool like spectrograms and things like that. And more recently, we've been moving into taking like putting little electrodes on plants and taking the biometric data, so to speak, the fluctuations in voltage in the water in the plants, and then you can run it through a MIDI board and you can get really cool sound that the plant itself is generating, albeit mediated by humans. So I guess partly it's a desire for community, but partly just how else might I translate the words into new patterns, into a different material form, always though wanting to remain as analog as possible, that there's a groundedness at the heart of whatever the work is that I'm working on.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
I started working on these films, and I know nothing about film. I just patched together images I liked, and it was mostly collage effect, and shot some of the images myself. I just use my phone. It's very low tech. But I kind of like the low tech part as well, that it's very home movie made. Like I love old Super 8s, old Super 8 films that you can find. The real ones, not the ones that are created by AI now. And yeah, just again, that found footage, it's like you're having this portal or view into someone's life. Yeah. So long ago, like the person I'm writing about in this book, his mom is German, actually. She was from Frankfurt an der Oder originally, and then moved to Berlin and then Baden-Baden, and she lived through the war, and she was older now, but she was tiny at the time and has some very distinct memories of it. But at one point she showed me her father was a photographer and cinematographer, and she had some home footage of living in Germany in the 30s. And it was like so amazing just to see like a home movie, a family home movie from so long ago.
That time. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I think there's something really powerful about just homemade films.
Yeah.
So that's what I was working on with that.
Yes. That's interesting. It's very good. Recommend to everyone to check them out. And you know what? You just mentioned again the plants and flowers with your new project, and because it was very obvious to me reading Ledi, you talk about plants, flowers, herbs. They play a central role in the whole book, and I think that's the perfect segue to your latest book, Blue Things Itself Within Me. That's lyric poetry, ecology, all of that in a new book that was just released, right? February this year.
Yeah,
Awesome.
That's right.
Can you tell us a bit about your latest book?
Oh, sure. I would love to. So it's called Blue Thinks Itself Within Me, which is a variation of a phrase that I found in Merleau-Ponty. So I was reading a lot of his phenomenological writings, and he's been really influential for eco-phenomenology, like people thinking about ecology and phenomena, and thinking about the agency of plants and more than human kin. So a lot of my most recent work, like my last book was A Blueprint for Survival, which was poetry. And then this one, which is eco-poetic. So it's sort of auto theory and poetics, thinking about ecology and what is lyric poetry and how might it have a connection to ecological thinking. The turning point for me, I suppose, was I started going to Fairy Creek on Vancouver Island, or Adaishk, as it's known by the Pazyryk and Dididat First Nations. And this is one of the last remaining old growth valleys, forested valleys on Vancouver Island. And it was the site of the largest civil disobedience movement in Canada, beyond even the War in the Woods, which took place at Clayoquot Sound in the 90s. So I started going in the fall of 21, I think it was, and just helping out. So they would have blockades and barricades. There was a strong RCMP, our mounted police presence. They had like a community industry resource group, which was there to basically try to break the protesters. Very much anti-Indigenous, anti-trees, there to support industry. And help them to get their job done, which is basically to cut down the last of the old growth forests. And so I started going when I could in between my work. So I could only go for a weekend here or there. But just seeing how deeply connected spiritually Elder Bill Jones was to that place. He's Pazyryk elder. And that the forest has this incredibly powerful spiritual force, not just a physical presence. I mean, it's beautiful to be there. It's peaceful. The smells are amazing. The sounds, but just the sense, you do sense a presence in the forest from these old trees, like grandmother tree, grandfather tree. That they're kin, and they support this whole host of other creatures. So you have the marbled murrelet and this old growth speckled-belly lichen and the mosses, the salmon, the bears, and that from an Indigenous perspectives. And I don't want to say that it's a homogenous perspective because there are many different First Nations with somewhat different practices, but overall, this strong spiritual belief that these are our kin. They're not just they're not resources to be cut down. You know, salmon isn't a tin of tuna or a tin of salmon. It's a being that is living its life, and then it swims back up the river from the sea, and it dies, and it gives nutrition to the trees, which then carry its body into it and continue to live. And this idea that, you know, thinking about Ledi, the trees, the beautiful Western red cedars and yellow cedars, like they've in many cases been there for 700, 800, 1,000 years. They go back so far, just as the old growth speckled-belly lichen colonies have probably been in that river valley since the last ice age, which makes me think about, you know, they are messengers in a way too, just like Ledi is a messenger, asking us to think beyond our current moment and our being caught up in getting and spending and commerce and growing the GDP, growing the economy as if it's a creature, and the current war that we're seeing in Iran, and just wanting to say, breathe, you know, create a space for all of these beings to live and stop this sort of homicidal culture that we're currently contributing to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what?
So the book is about that. It's about describing my experiences there, but also theories about poetry.
Yeah, it is so resonating with me, and I, as you were explaining this, I was thinking about that there's this aspect of re-enchantment, I think, that many of us working creatively or artistically encounter, and that is this re-enchantment, which is often seen as something, it's just for the art, it's just, nice to have thing. But I think as you explain what you experienced there and what you saw there, and I think it pops up in many places that this kind of re-enchantment is some old wisdom that we really need right now, and that really wants to show itself through various outputs, various media, various art forms, and in many places through many people at one time, because it's so much needed, and it has been forgotten or oppressed for such a long time. And there's something so beautiful to witness in a way that this tender and subtle thing is becoming more powerful.
Yeah, I love how you say tender and subtle. And very quiet as well in some ways. And just to take the time to pay attention. I think art does that so beautifully, like saying, like, of course, defamiliarizing, but holding space for other beings to speak. So a lot of the work that I'm really interested in right now is thinking not like, how can I write about this tree or this lichen, but how can I write with it? Or how can I create a space for it to speak on its own behalf? So that agentic quality, how can I acknowledge it as kin, as having a voice and speaking to me? And how can I listen? What can I hear from it? Like a kind of humility that we're not used to as certainly as humans, and certainly in this contemporary sort of hyper-capitalist society that we live in. We're not used to listening and thinking, what can I learn? Not what can I tell it to do, or what can I do with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful thought, and maybe even a good note to kind of end on. We don't want to take too much of your time. I heard something of 130 student papers that are waiting for you.
They are.
I have two pretty short questions that I ask all of our guests towards the end. One question is, do you have something that inspires you right now? Can be nature, poetry, people, movies, whatever, that you want to share with our audience that they can maybe also read up or consume in some form?
Oh boy. I'm thinking a lot about community right now, and how to build more sort of local, resilient communities. Like, how can we, and what role artists might play in that, poets, writers, because I think we're going to be entering some very difficult times, and how do we create the sort of common vocabulary and stories and symbols that we might need to move towards that. That's sort of what's been inspiring me right now. But as far as like a text or a book or an artwork, I speaking of this idea of writing with, not about. There's a wonderful book by a Canadian poet that I've done a bit of work with, Sophie Ann Edwards, and she just had a book come out called Conversations with the Kagawang, and she's creating a space in her book for the river to express itself, and does some very cool work with like a field notebook, but like leaving letters, gold letters in the ice of the river to melt and move, and seeing how the animals track them and move them along, and thinking in a very beautiful way about how am I interacting with and thinking with and alongside the river, or river, which is gendered as a she. She thinks of the river as a presence. And kind of analogous to that, Robert McFarlane just came out with Is a River Alive? And sometimes his books can be a bit macho. But he does some pretty beautiful things in Is a River Alive? And I was sort of thinking about it in relation to that, because he's thinking about, now again, he's thinking, can we take the lead, and this has been around for a long time, but that idea of like Pachamama, like how do we take the idea of, say, a human legal framework and apply it to trees, to the natural world? It's still holding us within this human paradigm, but nonetheless, it's a step in the right direction, I think. So he goes on several journeys. He goes to like a cloud forest, I think in Ecuador. He goes to Quebec and goes on the river there. And then just related to that, the last book I would mention is by Leanne Betasamosake Simpson. And it's her book called Theory of Water. And it's very beautiful. So it's called Anishinaabe Maps to the Times Ahead. So she's thinking about, from an Indigenous perspective, about water. And water, of course, water is life. And it's a beautiful book too. So I would recommend that to listeners.
That's, if you ask a poet, you get 3 books and a sense of community. That's amazing. Thank you so much. We put it in the show notes, lots to read up on. So the last thing I really want to know, you just published your latest book. What else is coming up? Are you reading it live? Can people see you? Do you have other media outlets planned, like maybe videos or something? What can we look forward to?
I am working on another poetry film based on a long poem from my last collection about paper birch. So that will be a longer, my longest film so far will be maybe 17 minutes, something like that. But that's still, I've done a sort of rough cut, and now it's with my soundscape artist who's working on it.
Amazing.
But when that will appear somewhere, I don't know. I send them off to little poetry film festivals and we see. And then my next book, hopefully, I'm working on is about Fairy Creek and about old growth speckled belly lichen. But that's still in my head. It's not, there's nothing. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, people have your links. They can check up on it. Fantastic. Kim, thank you so much for taking the time and being here.
Thank you so much.
And sharing your beautiful journey with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's truly a pleasure.
It was so great. Yeah.
I
just love this weird coincidence that we both stumbled upon the same story, or it called us.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Discover more inspiring talks, audio documentaries, or art performances. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and visit our website for more information. That's maison-douce.com. maison-douce.com.